Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Also, I really just want to acknowledge that this is the first time I've had a candle going in the background of a video in a very long time, and I just had to bring back that little bit of nostalgia. I used to put one in every single background, like when I started my channel, so just wanted to bring that back and I wanted to point it out. Also, it's my first time burning a fall candle for this year because fall is upon us. A big part of my fall routine is soup season. I love making soups. I'm apparently good at making soups. So today I'm going to be sharing with you the first installment in a new series I'm gonna try this fall called Sip and Savor, which is going to be a collection of my favorite soup recipes. And I'm way too excited about. Why soups? Well, they're easy to make in big batches. You can freeze them and you can pack a lot of nutrients into them. You can make them as affordable as you want. I can't really say if my soups are the most affordable. I'm not entirely sure, to be quite honest with you, but I know they're delicious and I know people love them. So without further ado, let's get into today's soup. So today's recipe is a slightly different version of French onion soup. This one also has shallots and mushrooms mixed in, and instead of actually baking the soup in an individual little soup ramekin, I bake like the bread and cheese separately and just add it to the top, so it just makes it a little bit easier for people who don't necessarily have all the fancy dishes. So yeah, if you'd like to see how to make my French onion and mushroom soup, then keep watching. Of course, the recipe will be in the description if you would like to copy and paste it, print it off, whatever works for you, but I am going to quickly go through the ingredients that you're going to need. So you're first going to need 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 1/3 cup of olive oil, about 4 medium onions cut into strips, 3/4 cup of shallots sliced, or you can finely dice them, whatever you prefer. I just sliced them. 2 teaspoons of sugar. That may seem weird if you've never worked with onions before, but hang in there, stay with me. 3 cups of mushrooms, 2.5 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, 3 teaspoons of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of pepper, 1/2 cup of white wine, 7 cups of beef broth. This works out to be 2 of those 900 ml cartons. If you don't want to use beef broth, there is a mushroom broth that Campbell's makes. I saw it at the grocery store yesterday and I took a video, so I'll go ahead and insert that. You could use that as an alternative. That would be delicious. This is optional, but I like to add in the rind of a parmesan block and some fresh thyme. I also add to mine as well. You don't need it, but it tastes good. And then for the bread and cheese topping, you're gonna need about 1 cup of bread per serving, cubed, and about 1/2 cup of Gruyere cheese per serving, grated. Also, I'll mention I prefer to make my soups in a Dutch oven pot. I find that's the easiest way to develop flavor on the stove. And that way, if you need to put it in the oven, you can. If you don't have a Dutch oven, feel free to use whatever stove pot you prefer. Just make sure you use one that's big enough that you're gonna be able to stir things with a ton of hot liquid in there, so keep safety in mind when you choose the size of your pot. And I'll also mention that this recipe will make about 4 large portions of soup or 8 smaller portions of soup, so depending on how you want to divide that up, that's about how much this recipe makes. Feel free to double it if you need to. Okay, so in a large pot, you're gonna melt the butter and add the oil to the pan once it's heated up a little bit. Put the element on about medium high, which for me is about a 6 or 7. You should see the butter begin to bubble, and you'll see my hand go in and see that the temperature is hot enough before I add those in. Once your butter is bubbling, you're gonna add in your onions. Give them a good mix, coat them in the oil and butter mixture, and then go ahead and cover the pot, let them start to cook. So when your onions begin to start to look like they're cooking, they're starting to turn a little bit more translucent, this is when you're gonna add in your shallots and your pinch of sugar. So you may be wondering if you're not familiar with this technique. The sugar, it's not enough that it's actually gonna turn things sweet. What it's gonna do is bring out the natural sweetness in the onions, and it's gonna help it caramelize in a way that it's not just gonna straight up burn, believe it or not. You're gonna have enough butter and oil in the pan to keep things from burning as long as you keep an eye on it, but the sugar will really help things break down, caramelize, get that beautiful caramel color. So when your onions and shallot mixture have become a bit more cooked, the onions should look more transparent. You might see a little bit of color developing now at this point. You're gonna add in your sliced mushrooms. Give that a nice stir and throw the lid back on the pot. This is the point where you think you need to give things a bit of patience and time. So about every 5 to 8 minutes, open up the pot, give things a nice stir, cover it, and leave it alone for another 5 to 8 minutes. If you're constantly stirring, you're not going to develop those flavors the same way. You kind of have to let things go a bit brown, even if it is at the bottom of the pan. After your mushrooms are in and stirred, you're going to go ahead and add in your minced garlic and your Italian seasoning. Now that your onions and mushrooms have fully cooked down, here is what that's going to look like. It should be pretty much reduced to half the size that it was taking up in the pan originally, and things should be dark, very flexible, very soft. Now, you might have a bit of flavor stuck to the bottom of the pot. This is totally normal. It is okay. We're going to continue to use that. That is Flavor Town, people. And how do you do that? Well, you throw in some liquid, and that will allow the stuff stuck at the bottom to come and marry in with the liquid and the onions and the mushrooms. We're going to deglaze the pan. This is what the white wine is for. So this is when I add in the white wine. If you don't want to use any alcohol at all, you could do this with water. The wine definitely does help with the flavors though. Use what you prefer, but you're gonna throw in your white wine, let that steam up a little bit. It's gonna steam, it's gonna make noise, totally normal. Give it a good whiff, it is the best smell in the world. Then you're gonna cover your pot again and reduce it for about 3 to 4 minutes. Next, we're gonna preheat our oven for our bread and cheese toppings. So go ahead and preheat the oven to 400 degrees at this point. And now it's going to start looking a bit more like actual soup. So you're gonna add in your broth, your parmesan rind if you have one, your fresh thyme if you have that, and your salt and pepper. Go ahead, give that a nice good stir. You're gonna reduce the heat down to, for me, would be like a medium, which would probably be around 4 or 5 on the element, and just let that cook for about 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you're honestly good to take out the parmesan rind. You could leave it in there if you want, but I find it's a little harder to get out because the longer you leave it in there, the soggier it gets. It's gonna look a little disgusting, but it really helps bring really good saltiness to the soup. If you're not using a parmesan rind, you could go ahead and add a bit more salt if you want. Then you're gonna cover it back up, give it another 5 to 8 minutes, and then remove the fresh thyme if you have that in there. They'll be fairly easy to remove. A lot of the leaves will have come off naturally, and that's good, that's what we want. But go ahead and pick out the actual sprigs, like the twigs, the branches, whatever you want to call it. And at this point, your soup is technically finished. So I'd recommend go ahead, take that off the heat if you want, or just reduce the heat to really low. Keep an eye on it if you're gonna keep it on the heat. Give it a stir every so often. Next, we wanna give that beautiful bread and cheese topping. And I have to say, it really is better with the Gruyere cheese. It's expensive, but I do think it's worth it. So separately on a lined baking sheet, I line mine with tin foil. That's just my preference. You can use parchment paper if you want. I'm gonna spread out those bread cubes so that they're one even sheet and none are overlapping each other. Gonna give them a light spritz with some olive oil from like a mist pump. And then you're going to apply the Gruyere cheese over the top, and you're gonna bake that in the oven at 400 degrees. I think this took around 10 to 12 minutes. I admit I didn't do an exact timing on this. I believe it was 10 to 12 minutes. It may have been a little longer. The cheese should be bubbly, almost crisping up a little bit, getting crunchy if you like that. And then the edges of the bread that aren't covered in cheese, they should be getting brown and crispy. Hopefully not burnt, but they should look like they have been in an oven. Once those have come out of the oven and they've cooled enough for you to remove them and individually separate them, pour up your bowl of soup, throw as much as you want on top. I usually do about a cup. For me personally, that's for a larger portion of soup. Once your bread and your cheese is in, if you have any excess cheese, you can go ahead and throw that in your soup as well. It tastes divine. Beautifully warm, caramelized like flavor. It is like the coziest thing. I've always loved the flavor of like onions, mushrooms, garlic. So like if you are too, this soup is right up your alley. And I didn't realize how easy it was to make until I did it. It also freezes well. So go ahead and throw whatever's left over after you eat your first bowls, because believe me, you will want to have some immediately. The rest can go in a freezer bag or freezer safe container, whatever you prefer. So yeah, guys, that is my French onion and mushroom soup. I hope you guys found this video helpful and enjoyed it. Please give me a thumbs up if you liked it, if you want more soup recipes this fall, and leave me a comment down below telling me what your favorite soup is. Maybe it is one that I have a recipe coming up. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I appreciate you for sticking around, even though I don't upload very often. but I still really enjoy doing this when I get the time. So hopefully when I finish my office admin program, I will be back to making more content for you guys. Bye!